Greetings everyone, my name is Sai, and a lot more professional channels might do 2, maybe even 3 episodes of a new series before deciding to launch a spin-off, but not so here on my channel. 1 episode of Game Design Sins was enough for me to decide we need something on the opposite end of the spectrum as well, for praising a game for something it does exceptionally, and should be something game devs look up to when designing things for their own games. And what game has brought on this sudden spurt of inspiration from me? Well, you already know because it's in the title, but we'll get into that in a bit. So, what's an issue a lot of games have? Well, specifically here I'm thinking about puzzle games, because they tend to be the biggest offenders of this, and that is that the story and gameplay exist on opposite sides of a giant brick wall. If the story's going to progress, the gameplay has to stop, and if the gameplay's going to progress, the story has to stop. So, why is this bad? The reason I think this is an issue is that it can often feel like what's happening in the story and what's happening in the gameplay can be completely divorced from each other. And the worst case scenario is if one ends up being not as good as the other, because it can mean a big section of your game ends up being really frustrating for the player. And while they may want to be doing one thing, they're being forced to do another, and that builds resentment. A great example of fucking this up can be found in Soma, the whipping boy of the first episode of Game Design Sins, that I plan to continually bully at every conceivable opportunity until I've extracted every nanometer of entertainment value that it wasted. Okay everyone, I know you're having a jolly good time pondering the nature of human consciousness and running away from scary octopus monsters, but now it's time to abruptly stop all of that and play a frequency matching puzzle, or a file management puzzle, or literally every single fucking puzzle in that game that in no way related to anything happening in the story. But critically, this isn't only an issue in shitty puzzle games like Soma, and so to give you an idea of how difficult this can be, let's look at my 2 favorite games, Undertale and Portal 2. They both suck at this. So, you complete a story segment in Portal 2, and congratulations! We're now dumping you underground and the story's going away for a little while, until you solve all these puzzles we decided to put in your way. Well, why do I have to do these puzzles? Can I just go around them or something? I mean, there has to be a giant staircase around here the employees use, right? Nope, we've decided that they've all arbitrarily collapsed. Or, how does this bridge seed puzzle tie into the overall narrative of the game? Like, why is it here? Well, not at all. It's here solely for the purpose of giving us a break from the combat. And our story reason for that is because the monsters built a lot of puzzles, and it got to the point that it became tradition to build puzzles everywhere, and that's why there are puzzles everywhere. In both of these cases, the story is having to bend over backwards, twisting and contorting itself in order to provide gameplay. I mean, you can just see the big lever being flipped back and forth between story mode and game mode whenever the switch happens. But this common problem in games is why Pony Island stood out to me, because in my experience, it has the single best merging of narrative and gameplay that I've ever seen. So, what's Pony Island? Well, I'm glad you asked. Pony Island is a game by Daniel Mullins, wherein you play someone who is, for all intents and purposes, being forced to beta test Satan's new game, Pony Island. That's right, Satan, the fallen one, the jailer of the damned spirits of hell, apparently has an interest in game design. However, it turns out Satan is quite an incompetent programmer. Gee, if only there were a YouTube show he could watch that would teach him how to make his games better. So while trying to find a way out, you have to hack into the code of the game itself to both fix bugs and to get around bad game design, to hopefully free your soul. It actually reminds me a lot of Undertale in the way it aims to be a deconstruction of games with a lot of fourth wall breaking elements. So, what makes Pony Island special? I'll give you guys the example of the puzzle that really stood out to me. It's when you get stuck at a river, and the devil tells you that in order to proceed, you need to play a certain level 100 times in order to earn enough XP to get the wings upgrade. And of course, you ain't got time for that shit. So instead, you hack into the game itself and set up a loop in the programming to automatically give you enough XP to level up, and after doing so you get the wings upgrade. And it was at that moment that I had to take my hands off the keyboard and think about what had just happened. I had just played a puzzle that tied in so well to the narrative that it didn't feel like an interruption, but instead felt like a very natural continuation of the story through gameplay. In that instant, the story helped to reinforce the puzzle, and the puzzle helped to reinforce the story. It was a perfect fusion of gameplay and narrative. I mean, yes, technically a lever was flipped. We did go from game mode into story mode and then back again, but it was so well disguised, you'd be forgiven for never noticing, and that's what it's really all about. We, as players, really do benefit from breaks in the main gameplay in some way, whether that be by taking a break to flesh out the story, or through a minigame, or the like. Because if the game is nothing but its core mechanic, then it runs the risk of getting really old really fast. Smaller games can get away with that. Portal 1, for example, really only has the main puzzle-solving gameplay for most of the way through, but it's only 2 hours long, so that's not an issue, and is why Portal 2 has a much broader and more present story running through it. So the issue here isn't the fact that the breaks exist at all, but rather how well they can hide the cuts in and out, primarily by justifying it within the narrative and being very selective to the type of gameplay you employ. And like I said, most games don't bother, and for a lot of people it's a non-issue. But it's when a game comes along and does this so ridiculously perfectly that I really have to just step back and applaud it. And that is what I think game designers can learn from Pony Island. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching. Again, this is very much an experimental idea of mine right now, so any and all feedback is greatly appreciated. And of course, if you like this video, then I'd ask that you go have a look at my Patreon page. That's right, come help keep my lights on so I can continue to work on videos full time. Other than that, just want to say thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Later. Special thanks to my Patreon patrons, Matt Flowers, Von Golo Sky, Isaiah Christo, and Craig McClure for helping to support the channel.